Russian soldiers were ambushed. The soldiers were identified one by one. Ukrainian FPV drones destroyed ammunition depots. FPV drones are tracking and destroying Russian armored vehicles. Stay tuned for more and subscribe to the channel. May 25th, 2025. Russian motorcycle infantry were advancing toward positions in the Chasiv Yar region of eastern Ukraine, where fighting was intense. Suddenly, there was a huge explosion. Mines that had been planted along the route of Ukrainian troops were detonated by remote control. One of the enemy motorcyclists was injured. The other chose to flee the scene quickly. However, FPV kamikaze drones would not let the enemy escape. As the enemy infantry crossed the barbed wire fences along the border, the drone detonated in front of the enemy motorcycle. Panicked, the infantry attempted to flee on foot. However, before they could advance, the death machine from the sky rendered them ineffective. The remaining wounded enemy infantry were neutralized by the bombs of the unmanned aerial vehicles. Enemy infantry was moving with their weapons among the rubble of buildings. An FPV kamikaze drone operator moved to neutralize the enemy infantry detected by reconnaissance units. He arrived at the location of the enemy soldier based on information from the reconnaissance units. He ran up behind the soldier and launched a fierce attack. There was a huge explosion, and the Russian soldier lost his life. May 25th, 2025. A group of Russian soldiers attempting to advance toward Pokrovsk tried to approach Ukrainian positions using a simple vehicle. However, this attempt ended when they struck one of the mines previously laid by Ukraine. The violent explosion completely destroyed the vehicle, rendering the soldiers inside incapacitated. May 2025. Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29 fighter jets continue to carry out precision airstrikes at multiple points along the front line. The latest operation took place near the settlement of Hlotov in Russia's Belgorod region. The attack targeted Russian military positions, including locations where personnel affiliated with the FSB were present. May 24th, 2025. The 47th Artillery Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces is working tirelessly on the front line. The units are continuously firing at coordinates provided by intelligence. Heavy artillery fire is keeping Russian positions under constant pressure day and night. At the same time, they are clearing the way for other Ukrainian units. The Azov Battalion, the most experienced unit of the Ukrainian army, destroyed many enemy targets over the past week. Among the targets destroyed were underground shelters used by the enemy to hide in forested areas and launch attacks, communication infrastructure located in forested areas, enemy vehicles and soldiers, all of which were effectively destroyed. The brigade used FPV kamikaze drones and unmanned aerial vehicles to destroy enemy targets. The operations took place in the Kharkiv region. May 25th, 2025. Russian forces launched an attack on Ukrainian positions on foot. Ukrainian troops detected the enemy infantry's movements in time. The troops relayed the necessary information about the enemy's situation to the command center. Ukrainian defense forces launched an attack against enemy infantry with the support of drones. FPV drone operators targeted enemy soldiers one by one. Enemy soldiers attempted to escape from the kamikaze drones. They made sudden maneuvers. However, all these attempts were in vain. The operators had taken up a hunter's position. They were hunting down Russian soldiers one by one. After the attacks, loud explosions were heard one after another along the border. Each explosion meant one less enemy. As a result of the successful defense by the units, 11 Russian soldiers were neutralized. The message from the Ukrainian army to Russian forces was clear: those who come cannot leave. Russian forces launched an attack with vehicles and motorcycles near Chasiv Yar. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones kept enemy vehicles under surveillance. The enemy was moving into the area from different directions. This was a new tactic being tried by the Russians. Ukrainian forces launched their first attack on a group of motorcyclists. Part of the enemy group was neutralized with mines. The rest of the motorcycle groups quickly left the area. The enemy groups spread out into the forest. Their goal was to get away from the Ukrainian reconnaissance drones and disappear. But the Ukrainian reconnaissance drones didn't let the fleeing enemy infantry go. With the assistance of unmanned aerial vehicles directed to the area where the enemy was located, the fleeing enemy infantry was also neutralized. The coordinated use of mines and FPV kamikaze drones in the operation inflicted heavy losses on the enemy in a short time. Only the enemy's burning vehicles remained in the area. Ukrainian forces are using FPV kamikaze drones to destroy Russian armored vehicles. Enemy vehicles attempting to cross the Ukrainian border and advance toward their positions were attacked by FPV drones. Enemy infantry abandoned their vehicles and fled the area on foot. The 414th Separate Engineering Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Army targeted the abandoned Russian military convoy after the first attack. The aim of the operation was to teach the enemy a lesson. Enemy vehicles were rendered completely unusable by FPV kamikaze drones. As a result of the Ukrainian forces' scrap operations, burning Russian vehicles remained in the area. The units left the wrecked vehicles behind so that the enemy would see what awaited them if they attempted to re-enter Ukrainian territory. The 414th Brigade is primarily tasked with conducting direct assault operations, reconnaissance missions, engineering-supported assaults, and high-precision drone attacks. Among the soldiers serving in the brigade are advanced FPV drone operators and cyber reconnaissance teams. They have been actively deployed on the front lines in Donetsk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Chasiv Yar, particularly in 2024 and 2025. Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles are illuminating the night. Troops are detecting enemy elements day and night. The detected enemy elements are neutralized at the most opportune moment. Troops detected 3 enemy infantrymen on the move. An unmanned aerial vehicle waiting in the area neutralized the enemy infantrymen with bombs. Enemy infantry had spread out on foot across the area. Reconnaissance units were moving as quickly as possible. They were identifying enemy soldiers scattered across the area one by one. FPV kamikaze drone operators were immediately mobilized based on information from reconnaissance units. Some Russian soldiers were attempting to advance through forested areas, while others had reached village settlements. Kamikaze drones successfully carried out attacks on these targets. After each target, the enemy's strength in the area diminished further. Although some Russian soldiers chose to hide in underground shelters out of fear, the target for the units remained the same. For Ukrainian forces, it didn't matter if the enemy targets were on the ground, in the sky, or underground. The primary objective of Ukrainian forces was to render all enemy vehicles, shelters, and personnel ineffective. The effective attacks carried out demonstrated that these objectives were being achieved. In May 2025, Russian units launched a multi-pronged attack on the city of Vovchansk in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. Russian soldiers were advancing toward Ukrainian forces amid the city's ruined buildings. Ukrainian surveillance drones were tracking the enemy infantry step by step. The infantry had gotten close enough. An FPV drone launched a direct attack on the enemy infantry. Another Russian soldier panicked and started running backwards. The enemy infantry was so scared that he kept falling while running backwards. The surveillance drone followed the enemy soldier step by step. When he reached his infantry comrades, he thought he was safe. However, a sudden kamikaze attack rendered the infantryman and his comrade ineffective. But the enemy threat was not over yet. 2 more enemy soldiers were moving among the rubble. A Ukrainian FPV drone struck the soldiers from the sky at lightning speed. a violent explosion occurred. The 34th Vovkodov Battalion of the 57th Motorized Infantry Brigade of Ukraine and the Merchaiki Unmanned Systems Battalion supporting them succeeded in repelling enemy infantry with successful drone operations. The coordinated movement of reconnaissance and attack drones enabled the enemy to retreat,